I did not want to be a farmer myself. I always thought farming was a job for losers. I wanted to be either a teacher or a trader. We always see farmers, the people that are struggling a big time that need help. That's a bigger debate, of course. I see farmers as entrepreneurs because they raised us. Most of my work was in Congo, but of course I came back to Rwanda and I started working for NGOs, still in the agriculture sector, still on entrepreneurship. How do we help these farmers become more entrepreneurial? Not by trying to change what they are doing, but by empowering them to do what they want to do. So we decided to start a potato business. So I left the business of teaching farmers how to add value to their crop to actually taking the risk myself. Then at that time, I got approached by a British digital healthcare company called Babylon Health. They asked me if I could help them set up. So I said, sure, this is my opportunity to actually be in a tech business because I had seen how quickly tech can scale and really have an impact on a lot of people. It was exciting, but tech was a whole different story. At some point, I think it was 2020, I got approached by Norrsken. It started as a conversation. Don't sit somewhere in Europe and assume that you know what Rwanda needs. Like, you need to come here, you need to talk to the people. If you do something that is not aligned with local ambitions, you are doomed to fail. I wanted to make sure of was that this does not end up becoming another one of those aid projects, because I'd seen them fail big time. Our approach was like, let's build it in phases and learn as we go. Like at that time when we started, it was in the middle of COVID, when everybody was trying to stay away from each other. I didn't expect that it would be that big because the demand was just massive.
Is entrepreneurship for everyone?
Of course not. But the entrepreneurial mindset, that should be for everyone.
All right, Pascal, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, man. Thanks
How's
for
it going,
inviting
man?
me, Yusuf. All good.
Yeah, been wanting to do this for a while now. We always meet, but we don't have a full-length conversation.
Oh yeah, like because we're always busy.
Yeah.
We are always busy from my own side, but also you're building an incredible startup. So there's not enough time to actually have this kind of candid conversation.
Absolutely.
Because one way or another, we are always on a hectic schedule. Yeah,
For sure, man.
and I'm proud of what you guys are building.
Thank you, man.
I'm sure there are a lot of young people out there that are appreciating what Bug is working on.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate it. We like to understand our guests' context, right?
Context.
We want to understand young Pascal. What was young Pascal thinking about doing in the future? What was he dreaming to become?
Oh, wow. Then I needed to... You may want to be more precise, like how young? Because I have a feeling like every year you always have had a new dream, a new vision of who the adult Pascal could become.
Yeah. Let's look at young Pascal starting college.
That was not young. But maybe it's easier to start with a little bit with... Actually, a little bit earlier than that. So today I'm 37 years old. I was born in the Ruhango district. So Ruhango district is known as the place where cassava comes from. So we have a big factory in my home sector called Kinazi Cassava Factory. Kinazi Cassava Plant, something like that. But it just shows like cassava is the main economic activity that people in my home village were interested in. So growing up, seeing everybody being a farmer, of course, as all of us knowing like the life of a farmer, especially smallholder farmer, I did not want to be a farmer myself. I always thought farming was a job for losers. I wanted to be either a teacher or a trader, because teachers were the most successful people I saw in my village, like speaking of role models, and also traders, because when I say traders, it was like a general term that was used to describe people who are in the retail and the wholesale. But of course, even farmers are traders because they produce their crop and they sell it to someone else. But in this case, it was more like buyers of cassava. These guys used to have what we used to call them Toyota Hilux.
Yeah.
No, sure, it's not Hilux. Stout. So they would come in a village, collect cassava, and go sell it either in Kigali here or to rural towns like in Ruhango or Muhanga. For some reason, I was always a big fan of the smell of the fume from the exhaust from these trucks. So I want to be like, like the driver, the guy that always keeps enjoying this. Not about the business itself, but the ability to have that smell. But of course, now when I think back, that's like that was a stupid thing because actually that means there was dirty fuel. But it means like I was always ambitious and always thinking about how can I do better than what I see in my immediate vicinity. Of course, this was before the 1994 genocide against the Tutsi. After that, then we started moving around, we started seeing the city, the ambitions changed. When I moved to, I call it a city, but it's more of a town, so Muhanga, the ambition started to be more like, can I be maybe a politician? Can I be an artist? What is this out there? Like the things I didn't used to see when I was still a young man. But of course, also like you start to realize that there is a certain reality, like the intersection between your ambitions and also like what is feasible. So I struggled with that a lot, especially in my teenage years. But the one thing for sure I knew was that I wanted to make a difference in my community, a difference in a society in general. Then at some point in a college, I met researchers from the Netherlands that were coming to Rwanda. They're mostly involved in the agriculture, still same sector, because of course that's where I got the most of my network. My mother was a big activist in the agriculture movement. So in Rwanda here, we call it cooperatives, like farmers associations. So she was active from village level right after the genocide against the Tutsi until even now she still is like one of the biggest farm leaders on the continent, actually. So I was always involved one way or another with whatever is going on in the agriculture sector. And agriculture means like development aid, because, we always see farmers, the people that are struggling a big time that need help. That's a bigger debate, of course, because I see farmers as entrepreneurs, because they are entrepreneurial. They raised us. Yeah. But at that time, there was a lot of these researchers coming to Rwanda through development cooperation. And I remember it was in 2009. I was working for a local hotel in Muhanga. It's called Splendid. It's like the biggest hotel in Muhanga. Yeah. So at that time, this hotel was trying to get a star rating, and nobody there could speak really fluently English, like among the employees. So the manager, I knew the manager, the owner. Then the owner asked me can you come here, maybe for 1 month, when I was on my holiday, to help prepare for this inspection, the star rating from the East African community. So I was there. When I was working there, I got one of those senior researchers that was in town, and we had a long conversation because, of course, I had grown up with farmers, so I knew a lot about farming. It was like their psychology, their thinking, and I had also read a lot of reports and books about development aid, because, of course, like most of those documents were in English, and my mother grew up. She's Francophone. She grew up in Congo, so she used to ask me for help with translation, and I knew that what is written in most of these documents is bullshit. Like, doesn't work. It's not really the reality of an African farm, at least a Rwandan farmer, the ones that I knew. Yeah. So we had a long debate in an evening with this Dutch researcher. Then at some point I was like, you know what? I'm sending more students, more students from a university. Maybe you can help them. And the help was more like, today looking back at it, you could call it a research assistant, but to me it was more of a translator at that time. Of course, like these people, they don't speak English, like the farmers do not speak English, so I would always help with the communication. But what I quickly realized was that it's not about the grammar. It's not about like how you translate a research question to the farmer, but it's more about the context, the meaning. So you can be having something in the back of your mind and you communicate to me, but it's very possible, very easy that I understand something that's completely different from what you had in mind. So like by translating these questions also like meant like putting them in the context, making sure that actually it's in language. By language, I mean like the meaning that a farmer understands. The simplest equation would be like if I come and ask you like, how big is your land? Like how many square meters? To me, like that's perfectly sensible question. But to you as a farmer, what the hell is a square meter? Like how do I even how like no farmer takes time to calculate this. Yeah. But also like if you look at the shape of most fields, because they are like on the hillsides, we call them in my area, you call them ichate, like some places they call it umuringoti, like, but like that plot of land, sometimes does not have like a straight lines. Yeah. Because maybe a farmer next door has, like picked some of the land from you, like, but it's you need basically to use the language that the farmer understands. Like, how many steps do you have to take to be able to go from the bottom to the top of your plot? Like left and right. Like you need to put it in the language that is mostly like already being used by farmers. So that was fun to me. That was fun to me because I always believed that when you do an intervention, let's say you are an NGO, you are a government, you are like whoever you are, you do a development intervention and you base that intervention on the conclusions that were drawn from wrong data. Basically, you cannot expect any change because you are actually just like lying to yourself, lying to the people you're supposed to be serving, and wasting everyone's time in the process. So that was always like fascinating to me. How do you close this gap between what the farmers actually want or like hope, expect, with what a donor or like a partner think the farmer needs? So that was interesting. I worked on it for 2-3 years. So started in Rwanda, then so in the Ruhango and the Mahanga, then expanded also from in the cassava value chain. Then started also working on potatoes. So that was north on the Rwandan side. So it's basically the potato belt around the volcanoes. On one side, Burera, Musanze, Nyabihu, and Rubavu. But also on the other side, North Kivu and southwest Uganda. At some point, also like worked a little bit in Burundi. But this was a time that I realized that actually farming is not a job for losers. Actually, these farmers are cornerstone to our economies. And I want to do more to help those farmers access the resources they need to be able basically to do what they want to do. And those resources are surprisingly out there. But in my case back then, those resources were, at least in my experience, were not applied in the right way. Because, of course, like of these misalignments of expectations, like what donor want and what farmer wants. So I worked a lot in agriculture around 2012. I realized that like most of my work was in Congo, but of course, like the unfortunate security situation in Congo became too complicated for me to continue working with the farmers in rural North Kivu. So I came back to Rwanda and I started working for NGOs. Still in agriculture sector, still on entrepreneurship. Like, how do we help these farmers become more entrepreneurial? Not by trying to change what they are doing, but by empowering them to do what they want to do. Not what by we, I mean like the development sector, what we think the farmers need. So I worked, actually my office was next door. There used to be a building in the old, I forgot the name of this office space, but it's just like next door, next to KBC. So yeah, I worked in the NGOs, still like with the same ambition. Like, I want to be the guy that builds a bridge between the farmers, the farming communities, and capital. So basically, 'cause I don't like. There's a lot of talk about like capacity building. Farmers already have capacities. Just like help them maybe become more bankable.
Yeah.
But it's not like you're changing how they do things. It's just like maybe help them like with like bookkeeping, like basically adapt themselves to the finance industry. Yeah. So continue to work on that. Then at some point I feel like I have been telling the farmers what to do, but I haven't taken any risk. Like they basically still take all the risk. It was around towards the end of 2013. That had also like seen experience of like some people from the Netherlands, mostly, that were coming to Musanze to help train farmers on how to add value to potatoes, because we have actually really good potatoes in Rwanda. But there's barely any value addition. Like, you either eat them as in a bar, or like you eat them at home, or like just like the normal French fries. But there is a lot more that you can do with potatoes, and one of the easiest thing to do with potatoes to make potato crisps. So around 2013, we had a farmer from the Netherlands that was also like making potato crisps from his own potatoes. So I came to Musanze, worked with him, went around farmers cooperatives in Musanze and Nyabihu. We even went to, back then it was still called Isaie Busogo, but it's the University of Rwanda now. Still like preaching the gospel of crisps. Some farmers organizations decided to do something about it. This was also a time that I think it was in the Ministry of Minicom, like Ministry of Trade and the Industry, that there was some conversations about can we help build local processing centers, like community processing centers. That's how I think they call them. But the idea was good from the community processing centers, from the farmers. Everybody was enthusiastic. But taking that step actually to make that happen, that was always a nightmare. So it's like the idea is good, but we want someone else to come help us build this. Yet I had seen that it was super easy to make potato crisps. So that's when at that time I also started to go into the Netherlands to this university called Wageningen University, and I had met a very good friend of mine, still a very good friend of mine now, that was also interested in doing something about potatoes. So we decided to start a potato business. So I left the business of teaching farmers how to add value to their crop to actually taking the risk myself. I was there for, I think, a year with this business partner who still runs the business. And while we were there, we got funding from USAID, from the USAID. So basically, we got funding to scale our production capabilities. But also on the side, we got a software to help us manage farmers. And to me, being an entrepreneur, that's always with my eyes wide open about what can be done to help, because I knew like there was a lot of potential in the rural communities, but that was always underestimated. I saw that software as the way it was helping us, like this can actually help also a lot of other SMEs like ours. I had also started being active on LinkedIn. This was around 2015, 2016. Then at that time, I got approached by a British digital healthcare company called Babylon Health. And they were excited about the Rwandan market, but they didn't know how to do that. And I had experience doing business in rural areas, like with farmers. And this business, what Babylon Health did was like to provide a platform where farmers anyone basically could pick up a mobile phone and get a medical consultation remotely, whether they have a smartphone or like a feature phones. Do they still exist, the feature phones?
They do.
Yeah. So they're not so smart.
Exactly.
Phones. So I had that experience working with people in rural areas. Like how do you package a message to people in outside of urban areas? And also, like, of course, you can imagine who eats crisps. These are not people in rural areas. So I also had experience selling these in Kigali. Like, I had to go into shops, like supermarkets, like with a box, like trying to convince the trader, like, this is something you should be stocking.
Yeah.
So I also had experience with that, like promoting the local pubs, bars, like supermarkets, like on the weekends, like sampling. I did all of that. So I already had that experience selling in the urban settings and also in rural areas. So they asked me if I could help them set up. So I said, sure, this is my opportunity to actually be in a tech business, because I had seen how quickly tech can scale and really have an impact on a lot of people. So I joined as commercial director. We set up the business, partnerships with telecom companies, with pharmacies all over the country. Of course, our name was a little bit problematic because we were called Babylon.
Yeah. Bible.
Yeah, from the Bible, but also like from that Rastafarian. Like it's not a very good name to be associated with. But of course, like the story behind it was a positive story. But I quickly realized that I was spending too much time explaining why we are called Babylon, rather than explaining our added value to to people, to our users. Like now I was starting to use this kind of language to our users. So we changed the name. So basically we removed the O-N at the end. So it became Babil. So that's the brand that most people will see, like at a pharmacy with a heart, like a purple heart and Babylon on it. But actually that's Babylon, but without the O-N at the end. So that grew up like very quickly. I left the company, I think it was around summer 2017. So that's when I left Rwanda to move to the Netherlands. But at that time, we already had almost 1 million users. Like that's huge. There were days like we would send an SMS blast in partnership with the telecoms and like 10,000 new users on one day. Like what I really loved about it is like the crisp business was good. Like was good, like doing like providing a market to farmers, like replacing the imports from like we had a lot of imports from Lays, from Urban Bites, I think it's a from Kenya. It was exciting, but tech was a whole different story. The whole different story of impact and the people we were reaching. Then it was like started discovering like new use cases that we had not thought about. We thought like people would, our initial user story was that, well, you can use this phone instead of so you can use your phone from your home, from your office. Basically as soon as you feel unwell, or even if you just like do it for preventive purposes, just like talk to a doctor. But in normal circumstances, people always, you don't feel well, so like, oh, maybe I would rest. It will go away. If it doesn't go away, tomorrow you send someone to the local pharmacy like to buy your paracetamol, but it knows what actually paracetamol does. Like go get me like some kind of medicine over the counter. Like you even go to the counter, like the pharmacist asks you, like, how are you? Like, what are you suffering from? Like what is your basically try to conduct a medical analysis. They shouldn't be doing that. Like, but we do that. Like, that's what happens when you go to the counter. Just tell the pharmacist, like, I'm suffering from this. Do you have something for me? So then if it doesn't get solved, then people go to either a clinic in the cities or in the rural areas. They go to the so-called centre to centre, like local health facilities. But by the longer you wait, the more acute your situation becomes, the more expensive it will be to treat you, like from your wallet, from an insurer's perspective, and also from the burden in healthcare. So we wanted to reduce the burden on the healthcare system. But although that is the theory we had at the beginning, we started discovering that actually a lot of people call because they want they have like the so-called embarrassing situations, like they do not want to, culturally like go discuss with someone like most around like sexual health, like reproductive health. So we started developing interesting use cases around that, and one of them was about sexual education or reproductive health education among teenagers, and I did do a particular case around that. Basically, the idea was that can young people, especially young girls, like be able to say like purchase contraceptives or like whatever they need for their reproductive health in a way that is that it protects their privacy, basically. So let's say like if you want to buy condoms, it's in our culture is seen as something like, like especially if you were young, like a young girl, a young man, you show up in a pharmacy, like some people might judge you. And
everybody's gonna know your business.
Yeah, exactly. But also imagine you are at the counter and they are like 5 other people. Yeah. So like, oh, can I have like the whatever Durex, for example? Yeah. Like it should be okay to do. It should be okay, but in our culture is it's easy to get misinterpreted, like to get judged from that. Although I think it's a responsible thing to do. But if you use a mobile phone, you could, for example, like order this online, then you can get connected to a pharmacy, then the pharmacist like picks whatever you need and puts them like in a paper bag, and then when you show up, you show the code, and then the pharmacist picks it and gives it to you, like something like that. So I worked on a case like that because I was seeing like this was actually like almost 40% of like all calls we got at that time in Babylon were about these kind of issues. So I did a project around that. I even got a scholarship to go to Sweden based on this case. But it was in 2016. But then I was like really like into tech because it changes lives at scale. I love SMEs. I still do work a lot with the SMEs, but I do not see tech as a sector alone. But tech is an enabler at scale, like allows to scale, like do things like to help a lot of people that you wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. So I went to Sweden to continue working on this idea. And also while I was there, I got to be introduced to the tech ecosystem in Sweden. And when I moved to the Netherlands, it was in 2017, like summer of 2017. I started working for some tech companies in the Netherlands, but combining agri-tech. So basically combining tech with agriculture. Worked a lot in West Africa, mostly on the commercial crops. So West Africa, East Africa, Rwanda to some extent. But most of our business was in the cocoa chocolate industry in West Africa, because chocolate is one of those fucked up industries. Some people compare it to coffee, but chocolate is big industry, and it only grows like in a few countries. Ivory Coast, Ghana. There's some other countries that grow some of it, but Ivory Coast and Ghana are like by far the biggest. But of course, there are issues of deforestation. There are issues also because chocolate consumers are in Europe. Like, it's not a food security thing. Like it's more like a luxury thing. And those consumers can be very demanding. Like, you bring in chocolate, like you are, like contributing climate problems. Like we see, like you are exploiting farmers, children. Like these chocolate companies, the Nestle's, the Mars of this world, like they have a lot of problems, like within their supply chain. And even laws are now starting to change in Europe, like to force these companies to be more responsible in their supply chains. But of course, these consumers, sometimes they don't understand the realities on the ground. I even see now, like even some entrepreneurs that I really like and love, building products to replace cocoa in chocolate. I have my reservations to that when it comes to actually it's called impact. But my reservation, like, what happened to those farmers? Like, are we giving them an alternative? Because you may say, like, we are replacing cocoa and chocolate because climate friendly, because that is what is selling in Europe. But what about the farmer in the Ivory Coast and in Ghana who has been for generations surviving on chocolate? What's going to happen to them? Like, those externalities. But these are like kind of questions that I kept asking myself, like, how can we bridge the consumer expectations, but also like that, let's call it maybe the developed market with our own markets, like with our own realities, because sometimes there's a lot of misalignment. And this is something like throughout all this journey has always been my main question. Like, how do you help our people that are actually sustaining these global markets to also benefit from it? And in all those experiences, has always been about basically people being misaligned, like wrong expectations, like miscommunication, misunderstandings. Yet, like these are like solvable problems. Like these are not coding problems. These are like social challenges. So I worked a lot in cocoa, and then I kept my contacts also with Sweden. I was already like helping some startups in Sweden that want to come to Africa. One of them was called Adressia, like trying to help with addressing systems in Africa, even in Rwanda. And at some point, I think it was 2020, I got approached by Norrsken. Simple conversation, was not like apply for this job. No, it was like, it started as a conversation, like, what should we be mindful of?
Yeah.
Because again, I had that experience also like working in Europe at that time already, but also like doing things that actually work in Rwanda. Like this, in spite of like challenges, I knew like, if you want to make change in Rwanda, don't sit somewhere in Europe and assume that you know what Rwanda needs. Like, you need to come here, you need to talk to the people. You need to understand the realities on the ground. Of course, like during implementation, things might change because you have your own realities, like your own reporting lines, like source of capital. But like, if you do something that is not aligned with local ambitions, you are doomed to fail. And I had also seen a lot of experiences also with this, like in West Africa, where these big chocolate companies come and say like, oh, we're going to build a school here, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But if you look at the impact return on a dollar invested, you could do a lot more with this kind of capital. So at some point, then Norrsken asked me like, actually, we're looking for someone to help lead this, the implementation of Norrsken in Rwanda. So it's like, sure, I'm happy to join. Of course, I ended up being 14 rounds of interviews.
The Norrsken saga started.
Yeah, but I joined Norrsken without meeting physically anyone in Norrsken. So of course, I was during COVID. Sweden, for some reason, life continued. It was an exception because in Europe, the rest of Europe was like really locked down. But Sweden, it was an outlier with the management of COVID. But of course, we couldn't travel there. So I did all my interviews remotely, and I joined around January 2021. I also remember, like, besides the input I had provided before when we were having this formal conversations, my first demand was that we're not going to call it like how you call it here, because in Sweden it has a different pronunciation. You call it like a Norwegian.
Yeah.
But having been through the experience with Babylon, it's like, no, how it looks, that's how you're going to pronounce it. Like, if it needs to be someone in Rwanda who has never been to Sweden or heard an interview with the founder of Norrsken Foundation or any Swedish pronunciation, they need to be able to read it. That's how we end up calling it Norrsken, because at that time it was still Norwegian. But that was super exciting, and the idea still was, how do we make sure that this good intention, this, Nicholas, the founder of Norrsken, and the management team, you made them actually physically when they came here during the market, the market research phase. Can I call it that way? So you made them before actually met anyone at Norrsken. So what I wanted to make sure of was that this does not end up becoming another one of those aid projects, because I had seen them fail big time. So I want to make sure that this, as much as possible, is at least seen, or like, it is like a local initiative to some extent, which also was like in line with what Norrsken wanted. But the risk of being perceived as a Swedish thing was always very high. That was always my input from the beginning. And also like making sure that the local ecosystem. By ecosystem, I mean like a local government, central government, the city where we would be located, entrepreneurs, the actual like innovation ecosystem sees this as our thing that we can influence. So basically, not someone sitting in Stockholm and saying that, you know what, this is how things are going to be. But having that humility enough that we don't know things. Like, at least we have an idea because we have built it in Sweden. We have seen like this kind of innovation hubs and other places. But we are humble enough that we come to Rwanda to listen to what the users need. So I always saw Norrsken as at least the hub itself as a product. So you build your prototype with some assumptions, but then put it in the hands of users and see how they react to it. Of course, like it's not like a mobile app that you can just like make some changes overnight. But our approach was like, let's build it in phases and learn as we go. Of course, anything you do, there are always challenges. You can imagine, like at that time when we started, it was in the middle of COVID, when everybody was trying to stay away from each other. We used to call it the social distancing. I don't know why we call it social distancing, because we remained social. Maybe like online, maybe should have been physical distancing. But basically, we are coming to Kigali at a time when everybody's trying to stay away from each other. Yet we were able to come together. That was the point of the hub. Like, let's bring this ecosystem under one roof. And that required a lot of storytelling, like the why. So that's why I was like always constantly mega active on social media. Yeah. To really try to tell the stories of what we like what we were building. Yeah, to some extent, I'm still very proud of what we built. And I'm very happy that the way Norrsken turned out to be. Today, about 1,500, 1,600 people are calling Norrsken their home. At a time, we didn't expect that it would be that big. Even some decisions were made like later to add new buildings that were not in the original plans. So because the demand was just massive. But to me, it's not just about the numbers behind Norrsken, like how many members, like, the statistics, but it's about the stories that are going to be told from that place. And the inspiration that comes from it. Like, tech is not something that people do, or tech or startups not something people do because they have nothing else to do with their lives. It's actually a serious business. Someone comes to Norrsken, and most, like, let's say, like people in charge of programs for young people. Like, they can be policymakers, they can be development partners, like people that are usually working with young people, but they have never considered like tech or a startup as a serious, as a serious project or like initiative to be involved in. But once they come and see that it is actually a serious business because Norrsken came from tech, that has the potential to change their mindsets. If you're a parent and you know like your child or your son, your daughter is trying to do something with the startups, you don't look at it as like, oh, they are trying to become losers. Like the same way I was looking at agriculture when I was very young. But if you ever happen to have been at Norrsken, like startups are serious stuff. So it's more of that, like that change in the mindsets that I see it as the biggest legacy of what we have done with Norrsken. And now my focus today is like, now that we have built Norrsken from scratch and launched it, what we learned during this process, can it be replicated to other cities? It doesn't matter whether they are small cities like what we call secondary cities, or like other large cities, like even bigger than Kigali. But can we help those cities also like dream big and start to invest more in the startup ecosystem, like startup community? Because sometimes we, especially in Africa, we do not see the potential in our young people. So we always say like, oh, we want to create jobs. Like, thank God, like you have like people like in Bag that are trying actually to create those jobs. But we do not make the necessary investments to actually make change happen.
Yeah.
So it's my hope that Norrsken here in Kigali can continue to inspire other cities. It's not just about the building. It's not about like the operations in the hub, but it's about the inspiration, like the people, like for the people that are in a position to make decisions, to consider startups or the startup movement or the startup ecosystem as something that can help those cities solve the issue for unemployment for young people.
Very interesting. Powerful, man. Powerful context, I would say. So I'm going to take you back on a couple of things.
Sure.
And we're going to start with... So there's always these things. I know you're very active on Twitter as well. X now. There's always...
not very much, but... Sure.
Not as much as LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But people always talk about entrepreneurs should follow the psychology of a farmer when they're running their business, right? Okay. And they kind of talk a little bit about some of the different things that a farmer does that could be borrowed into the entrepreneurship, in any kind of entrepreneurship endeavor. What do you think about that? What are some of the things that we can learn, let's say, from farmers in other types of businesses?
Well, one thing I really like about farmers is how they manage risks. If you have been through an MBA or like read MBA type of books, and they have learned about like how to manage risks, like how like bankers, for example, like money managers manage risks, because that's most of their business, what their business is about. It's so different from it's so different from how farmers manage risks, but also like how farmers manage these risks is like more relevant to our economies, because most of how the global finance sector manages risks does not apply to us. And that's why we end up paying like crazy interest rates, but that's a different conversation. But the farmers, like now there is like conversation about climate change, like what the farmers can do to be more climate smart. That's a good thing. But a farmer cannot change the way they do things overnight. So basically, in Rwanda, for example, we have 2 seasons. In theory, it should be okay to say like, oh, you applied these farming practices previous season, which in most cases has been for generations actually, and tomorrow you need to change and do this new farming technique, adopt new seeds, like new organic fertilizers, like all these. On paper, like actually these initiatives can be good for your farming, but they're just too risky for the farmer, because what the farmer does not know automatically becomes risky. And for the farmer, if they lose a crop, like a season, they are fucked. So there is no, like, they don't have like a savings, like there's no like a social system that will come to buy food for them. Like basically they're only on their own, so they cannot feed their families. So for entrepreneurs, what I think entrepreneurs can learn from that is that we are always told about the mechanics of building a startup, for example. So you start with phase A, B, C, D, like from a pre-seed all the way to scale up and maybe exit IPO acquisition. But we live also in a context here that's probably different from what Silicon Valley lives, so like the Stockholm ecosystem or Amsterdam ecosystem. So we have our own ecosystem here. We need to understand our own market and our own realities, and maybe not be drawn into the passion of copying what has worked elsewhere, but keep our eyes focused on our own realities. Our realities are different. We do not have a social, like a powerful, like a social security system that would save you if you are out of a job. Maybe even family and friends, like they also have their own problems, like you are not going to rely on them. So really, when it comes to managing risks, I think entrepreneurs can learn a lot from farmers and not try to take unnecessary risk that could take the business, that could kill the business. You can, of course, like being an entrepreneur is a lot about taking risk. Every day you take risks, but take the type of risks. Don't bet the company. That's what I'm trying to say, though. Don't bet the company. You can bet on some ideas, like some, new processes, new procedures, but don't bet the company for in the hope that you can get a quick win, especially if you're not in there for the long term, because farmers don't have any other things to do. Like most of them are going to remain farmers for their whole lives.
Yeah.
So they are in there for a long term. If you're an entrepreneur, like having that kind of like a long term approach and approaching every quarter like cautious, like have those gradual growth, but not bet the company, like do something that can kill the company.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I recently had a conversation with Alex Nane from Rwanda-Dutch Chamber, and he said something very interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. He talked about, we were talking about investments, right? And how when you speak to, let's say, bankers, they're making so much profits. They're reporting it every day, saying that this year we made X amount of profit. But then when you speak to them, you ask them, what kind of sectors are you investing in? And then they usually say that we don't have an amazing pipeline of businesses to invest in. And then when you go to speak to farmers and you ask them, what are some of the challenges? How can you grow? They're like, it's very hard to access a loan or people to invest in our farm business. What are your thoughts on funding for agriculture on the continent? What's happening there? Why, even though we know that agriculture is very important for most of our economies, why are farmers still reporting that they're struggling to find money? Is it their problem? Is it the problem of the investor not understanding that sector? What's happening there?
First of all, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's not just an African problem, but of course it's... Next time you speak to a bank and say like they don't have an amazing pipeline, just like ask them, how do you define amazing? Because maybe the issue is with the products they have. So first, I think, interestingly, there is some like a conversation that is ongoing, also like not just with the banks, but also like in the fintech world. How do we develop products, like financial products that are actually relevant to our markets? But also you need, so there's that innovation part that's happening within the financial industry, but also you need to think about like, where does that money come from? Like where that the bankers need to be investing. So then comes again to the issue of risks. So the bank needs to manage risk. There is a central bank that supervises these banks. And the central banks also has to deal with other complex, like global macro situations, like managing inflation, like even things that is beyond the control of central banks, like what happens with, let's say, with like, for example, with the International Monetary Fund, like IMF, the World Bank, the rating agencies, like if you follow the money, as they say, you also realize that at somehow, somewhere, what someone cares about, like the person that prints that money, is how do I keep control of my money? So the biggest problem is not how do we give more credit to farmers in Africa. It's more like how do we keep the old financial system stable, basically. Now, going back to the farmer side, even though there are all these new products that are happening, farmers, of course, we always see bank as a moving wallets. It's like, yeah, you have money, like, like give us some of it.
Yeah.
But the banks are not meant to give out loans. Like, of course, they make money through loans, but that's not, they don't exist just to distribute money. Like, farmers also need to understand that, like, maybe start off thinking, like, what are the potential sources of capital? So it can be through your customers, which will be good, or it can be like angel investing, like maybe, of course, I wouldn't use the term angel with farmers, but like there are different other potential sources of capital.
Yeah.
But more precisely, in my experience, what I've seen in agriculture, not just in Rwanda, but throughout Africa, actually.
Yeah.
Now, even pretty much in Europe, because there's also like different challenges, but they have like big problems with the climate laws in Europe. Farmers have been considered as the category of people that need to be protected. So they are the poorest, they're most vulnerable, like all of these, like they're put in a basket like where they need protection. So this is a little bit controversial, but like if I'm to be contrarian here, I think actually farmers need to be seen more as entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs who are producing a product that is needed in the market. I would give you an example. When I was still working in potatoes, sometimes like for a project, like the metric of success was like, when we started this project, farmers were receiving 150 francs per kg of potatoes. That day they are receiving 250 or 300 francs per kg. That is considered as like something. But actually, in reality, is that's not necessarily a good thing. Because somehow, somewhere, someone is going to have to pay for that extra. And in most cases, like in our countries in Africa, it's the consumer that ends up paying for that. And where are these consumers getting the money from? Like, basically just like inflation. If a kilogram of potatoes you are buying at 300 francs in the market here in Kigali, then tomorrow you have to buy it for 600. That's not fun for you as a consumer, but it may be for a farmer or like intermediaries who are involved in that supply chain. That's a good thing for them. So I think what needs to happen in agriculture is to treat farmers as entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs, you are forced to be efficient. However you sell your product, maybe you do not necessarily have to increase the price of your product. What matters for you is the margin. So it's not about, especially in our context in Africa, like, maybe in Europe you can chase valuations like revenues and stuff like that, even if you are losing money every time you sell your product.
Yeah.
But here it's about your margin. Are you profitable? So that's really powerful thing. And that can also mean that maybe you realize that as a farmer, I do not have to increase my price as long as my production cost goes down. If you take an example of potatoes, for example, if today, let's say a kilogram of potatoes 500, but maybe the product, like a farm price is 500, as an example. But the farmer's production cost is like 400 to 450. So there's a margin of 100 or 50 francs. So what matters for the farmer is not about the 500, it's the 100, the margin. So that means if you as a farmer, you can reduce your production cost maybe to 300. So that means your margin, it becomes like 500. Becomes 200. It means your business is more profitable. You can reduce your production cost maybe by let's say increasing your volume. That's possible because then your unit cost becomes lower, or like maybe by cutting some unnecessary costs. So that gives you a room maybe to move your farm price from 500 to 450. You're still more profitable than the previous time because like now you have 150. But for the consumer, that's a big deal because the end consumer then can start like buy more potatoes, for example, or maybe new use cases. Maybe we need to make more crisps. Maybe we need to make other products, other end products out of potatoes. But also means you are being more competitive compared to other options the farmer has, like which could be imported kaunga, like maize, like more competitive than a cassava farmer. So we need to shift that mentality from a farmers. Like you do not like you need to look at your business like that. So your farming activity as a business, and in the business, in our particular context, it's about your margin. And when you have consistently good margins, banks will be very happy to give you money. And if we have more user cases, most likely also there will not be like issues of inflation. So like consumers can continue to buy your product, which also allows you as a farmer to have even a more consistent market to sell to. So it's a complex question, especially considering that a lot of our people are still in farming.
Yeah.
But my powerful take is that farmers are entrepreneurs. They need to be treated less as vulnerable people that needs to be protected. The same treatment you get as an entrepreneur, that should be the same treatment the farmer gets. And the effort should be on being efficient for the sake of the consumer, because a consumer has options. They can buy from other farmers. They can stop eating 3 times a day. That's also an option. If you are like in processing, you can like find the other sources of maybe other raw materials. Like in cocoa, they are now starting to invent non-cocoa chocolate.
Yeah.
Like you need to be careful as a farmer. Like really think more as like any typical entrepreneur would think about their business.
Yeah. And how do we make the agricultural sector a bit more sexy and attractive for young people?
It needs to make money. It needs to make money. I've seen a lot of people like encouraging people like, oh, you should go in agriculture. Oh, like if you have 1 million francs, like almost $1,000, like you can be like a big entrepreneur in the agriculture sector. And I've seen a lot of young people also like jumping into agriculture because, of course, like you had this been preached in the conferences as sexy, and they didn't go in as you would go about back. Like they didn't go in as thinking more as entrepreneurs, and the results, like they lost their money. So we need to actually stop talking about agriculture being sexy. no business is sexy. Being an entrepreneur is hard. You know that already. So by attract young people to agriculture, they needed to go in being prepared. Like, this is a serious business. Like, there's a risk of us losing money. Don't just believe some slides you see in a conference and say, oh yeah, that looks profitable. I have land, like my family has land somewhere, like I'm going to go there to start growing tomatoes. It's not that easy. So I think the more we start having young people that are actually entrepreneurial, going to agriculture, making money, as a result, create jobs. Because you don't start a business to just create jobs. It is good to do, like we all want to do that, but you can't create jobs if you're not a sustainable business. So the more we can start to have successful role models that are going agriculture and make money out of it, make a living out of it, entrepreneurial young people, then it becomes easier to attract even more other young people to join the sector. Yeah. But we need to stop going to conferences, especially if we are not farmers ourselves, to go there to say we need to have more young people in agriculture. Oh, let's make it sexy. Oh, it is not sexy. No business is sexy. It is sexy when you succeed. But when you go in chasing that sexiness, you are screwed. You're going to have serious problems.
You're in it for it, right?
And what ends up happening is that the people that take that risk go in there with all the enthusiasm, and they lose their money. They will never do it again. They're out for good. They will never be involved in agriculture again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's now move a little bit into tech. So as you moved, a little bit away from agriculture, you got into tech, specifically in the healthcare sector. The idea of the solution you were providing was amazing, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody saw it. How I think, at least for myself, how I know that an idea is actually great is when I see a company, launching a product, and I'm like, why did nobody think about this? This is so simple, right? It's now clear, what should have been done. It's the same thing as ChatGPT and all these platforms. You're like, yeah, it sounds so simple, right? So I think the idea was very interesting, and it sounded very obvious, like somebody had to do that. But also at the same time, the company ended up struggling later, right? And here I'm trying to understand, is there anything that we can learn from that as well, right?
Yeah. It's a tough question. But especially with what happened with Babylon, it's also was a lot that was going on from HQ, from a corporate perspective. But here in Rwanda, what end up not just with Babylon, but most startups in tech products in general.
Yes.
If you have to convince people to use your product, it means there is still a problem. So your product needs to be something that people tell each other. Basically, your users become your ambassadors. Let's say, for example, take an example. I use WhatsApp on a daily basis. Nobody ever talked to me about WhatsApp. For some reason, someone told me about it. Definitely not someone from the WhatsApp team, and I ended up just using it. So that, to me, is the real definition of product market fit. When your users start telling others, their friends, their family, and their friends about your product. In the case of Babylon, we grew super fast. But also we did not have that core initial users that we actually aimed to serve. So we came with a theory that our market, that our product would help the market in this form. But we never took the time to really like take a few select tribe, it's called a tribe, of like royal customers to serve, so that we really solve their problem in a way that they can tell their friends about it. So what I see a lot with the startups is that if you have some users that use your product, it's considered fine. It's considered good. But you need people that really love your product, not just like or tolerate, like in some cases. But you want people to actively be using it, and it is not as simple as it sounds, but it is so powerful to get people to tell their friends about your product. And that's how also like you bring down your customer acquisition cost. Like that's how you scale. That's how you end up like becoming a massive business. So get a few people that use your product and dig deeper into like in our case, for example, Babylon. Now looking back, I wish we could have done more with the people that were calling for reproductive health questions. So like if we could have served those people, like those people could have been our best ambassadors rather than trying to be like everything for everyone, and that needs healthcare services. So find the people that really love your product, serve them, be with them, like I said, like do the things that don't scale with them if need be. And then once you have adjusted your product to in the way that they can start telling their friends about it, I think that's a powerful position to be in as you start like adding new features, like a new and going after new segments of the market.
And I guess that's really what makes entrepreneurship hard, right? Because when you speak to entrepreneurs, they would say number one problem is money. But then you will see a company well-funded still fail. So is it money again? You see another company saying, oh, the problem is, we're in a small market. But you see other companies coming in that small market and making it big. So I think when you start looking at it, you realize entrepreneurship is really hard, because I think I was reading something the other day, and I think I tweeted about it, which was achieving product simplicity is not simple.
No, actually, that is very powerful. Like, actually, that's the hardest thing of them all. that is the hardest. It does sound like a simple statement, but actually, that's a massive statement. So that simplicity is what makes people actually like. I know what that company does.
Because look at WhatsApp. It's the simplest product in the world. When it came out, you could only do one thing. You couldn't even post on your status. That wasn't even there.
I don't even use a status myself.
That's it.
But I use it like every day, like almost constant. That and X, like those are the apps that consume the most power and data on my phone. So, but that simplicity is really hard. There is the internal struggles, like as an entrepreneur, like before you launch, you start a startup, like you also have to spend a lot of time like thinking about like what could this become. So the enthusiasm, like also like pushes all of entrepreneurs to want to build more features, like we are this for that market. Like, oh, how dare you minimize my my product? We are way more than how you're just describing us. But also the other external forces, like in most cases, like if you have like investors, they can also be like also another source of stress for entrepreneurs. Like, oh, we want you to grow fast. Like, we want you to do this. Like, we want, why aren't you building enough features? Like, what, all these engineers sitting here, like, what are they doing? Like, so that simplicity you talked about is powerful, but it's also hard in practice because it means you needed to cut things. You needed to say no to a lot of things. And that's the not so much fun part about running a business because like you want to say like, oh, we are growing like consistently. Yeah. Like, what do we call product market fit? Sometimes just like people throw those terms in a mix just like to make them feel good, but they know they don't have it yet. But it's because it's like all these pressures around you, but having that humility and firmness, like to say like, we are not going to scale this until we have really served this customer.
Yeah.
And once this customer is happy and starts telling other people, and we can maybe through our own analytics, we can see that we are acquiring new users that without us putting in any effort. Maybe that time, like you can start like doubling down on the new features, like whatever scaling, like growth hacking strategies you had. Mm-hmm. But it is hard to achieve that simplicity. But it's a simplicity that makes easier to communicate about what you do, especially among the people that to some extent, like we don't care if your startup dies tomorrow. So if people don't care, it means like you haven't really touched their soul. Like you're not inspiring enough for them to be able to tell their friends, because also those people don't want to look ridiculous. Like you don't want to recommend a product that is sucky,
yeah, exactly.
or confusing. So yeah, no, I think that's really, really powerful.
100%. I think it's one thing that I've started realizing, because I'm like, it's very easy to build a very complicated product. It's very easy. It's very easy to build a product that has 25 different features, and when the founder is pitching it, they're saying, yeah, and these sector can use it, and the health sector, and farmers can use it too. It's like, what is this thing? It's like but you
have to realize, which to some extent I don't blame the founders, because that is what a lot of people in this kind of audiences want to hear. Like, is this big enough? Is this complicated enough? Is this, like they want to...
It sounds innovative enough.
Yeah, exactly. But most of those people are not your users. Like, even including myself, I'm an ecosystem builder. But in most products of entrepreneurs that I work with, I don't use them. So I'm not the right person to be the one giving feedback about those products.
And they shouldn't listen to your feedback.
No, they shouldn't. Especially if I'm not a user. Like my whatever input I might have is really close to irrelevant.
Yeah, it's your own opinion.
It is my opinion. Maybe they're not building for me. The fact that I'm not using it also means like they're not building for me, and that's okay. That's fine. That's fine. Not everybody is going to be your user, but the people that matter are the people you building your product for, not whoever is attending the next conference, like going to come to your demo day or like a pitch event.
Policymaker. I want the policymaker to...
But if the policymaker is your user, like maybe you are building like a government product, then it makes sense. But if that person is not your user, their feedback is relevant. Yeah. They can make you feel good, go to bed, feel awesome.
You took a picture and you posted on LinkedIn.
Yeah, but
said it was great.
But tomorrow you will be struggling when the bills show up.
No, 100%. I was telling my team, so I used to get frustrated every time, like on the group chat with my team, when people on my team would take a screenshot of a user, let's say, complaining about something. because our product has a freemium version, and then there's a paid version we just introduced recently. And what I used to tell people is that whenever somebody on my team would write that feedback, before, when we started, I used to get anxious. I'm like, oh my God, like everybody needs to love the experience.
Yeah.
And I started telling the team, I'm like, this is a non-paying user.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can listen to the feedback of non-paying users. Okay. You're going to keep building features for them, keep satisfying them. They never pay you.
Yeah.
For us to build a feature, even for that free user to have an account on our platform, it costs us money.
Oh,
No matter if it's $1 or less than $1, it costs us money.
Yeah.
Because we send you reminder emails, we send you all kinds of things, right? So you cost us money by being a free user. So, and then I would see a lot of people on my team, like want to serve, all of us, when we started, we wanted to serve those free users. And then I realized, I was like, unless that user has the potential of becoming a paying user, everybody will always have an opinion about your product. You can never listen. If somebody is not a paying user or has the potential to become one, if they say, if you don't add that feature, I won't buy the product, or maybe if you add it, I will buy. That's a good indication for you to listen to that feedback. And you can be like, okay, let's listen.
I like that you call it an indication.
Exactly. It's an indication. It does not guarantee, right? It's an indication that, okay, let's explore that.
Yeah.
Are there a bunch of other people who might want to buy it, who might have the same need as you have, right? Can we put something in writing? Can we sign a contract? Can we really formalize this request that you're putting in? Because otherwise, we will not engage our engineers to start building anything that does not lead to revenue.
Fully agree.
So what I realize is that, it's very easy to just go around and listening to everybody and trying to build something, so people can kind of like you, or if you want to be liked. I don't know if that's a thing you should be chasing as a founder. But then simple products take a long time. So I actually want to get some practical tips from your side here. So with Norrsken, you've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, right? Norrsken has invested in a lot of companies. So you've spoken to a lot of founders, you've also been a founder yourself. So what do you see that the founders who end up building great products that achieve product market fit? Because let's be realistic, most companies die without ever cracking product market fit, right? So only a few number actually achieve that product market fit. So the companies that you've seen through Norrsken and through your experience, what did the founders of those or those teams have that helped them to be able to build simple products that people really love?
Yeah. So I like that even though I'm no longer the managing director of Norrsken in Kigali, I'm still involved with Norrsken. So I'm still a mentor in the accelerator, like the startups that come through the program in Stockholm. But as you're saying, like a lot of startups die before ever reaching product market fit. And as we say, like there are a lot of reasons, but most of them is the lack of simplicity. So at least the ones that I've seen achieving simplicity are the ones that also have powerful people behind them, either through the board or through the on the cap table, like the investors that are also like pushing for that simplicity. Where the entrepreneur, the founder, or the founding team has that has less pressure to try to please everyone else. And the biggest risk that I see, at least in our markets, is that a lot of people like who end up investing in the startups or who end up advising startups have never been entrepreneurs themselves, so have never built the product themselves. And sometimes that makes it hard for them to understand these concepts we are talking about. As young founders, always like dealing with all these kind of pressures can be intense. Also, like when even your own, even internally, you also like have this inherent need to add new features because that's also like fun. But saying no to features, like deleting features, like all those things are never fun, because even in your team, like people that are suggesting these features, it takes them time and effort, and like seeing them, you saying, like, no, we're not building this. It's not fun. So the entrepreneurs that I see that tend to succeed the most are the ones that have backers that are also entrepreneurs. So if you have someone that is on your cap table that's basically this powerful behind you and has experience building products themselves, those are people at the best you could have. You could surround yourself with. Yeah. And those are startups also tend to be the most successful.
Interesting. What about the other concept of the second-time founder, which we always say that, which I'm also realizing that there's a couple of things that I'm starting to realize as I'm been building company for a while. I think number one is domain expertise does help. Like if you've worked in that specific sector for a very long time, you've really experienced that problem, yourself, and maybe with your founding team, your co-founders, you've really faced that problem. You've worked in a bank, so you've seen the problem in the financial sector and fintech. I think that helps you a lot when it comes to directing the product vision, because when you start building, you already have a very clear problem you want to solve. Yeah. And I think the reason why we end up building very complex products is that the problem is not well defined that you're trying to solve. Yeah. So it's a very let's say vague problem statement. So when you speak to founders who have a little bit more domain expertise, they want to focus on a very particular aspects on that problem. So there's a big problem. Yes, we can talk about food insecurity, whatever. But then they're focused on a very particular. Yeah, it's a chip that goes into this machine that a farmer is going to buy and then use in their farm. Like, we don't care about all of that stuff. Yeah. We just care about that. Yeah. If it's going to work in that particular, let's say, tractor. Yeah. Right. And I'm like, domain expertise is really good. Number two, which goes hand in hand with experience. A lot of founders, first-time founders, it's their first time, they've never had a job, right? So it's like they don't even have any experience doing anything. They thought about a great idea. They saw somebody come into the university, talk about entrepreneurship, and they're like, I'm tired of applying for jobs. I'm also going to become an entrepreneur. Yeah. So the experience of also, like, I've also worked, maybe I'm very smart in this sector, but I've also worked in this. Also that technical skill as well. It's like I'm very talented in building AI, softwares. Like I'm just really good at it. So like those couple of things, I'm also realizing that sometimes they might be very important in predicting the chances of success of a company, because the founders are less risky to invest in, right? As opposed to what have you done before when you're interviewing a founder? They're like, nothing. Have you had a job? No. Not an internship? No.
Yeah. That's a very good observation, especially with the first-time founders. And usually what goes wrong with first-time founders is around the governance. So if you don't have experience leading a team, how do you build like the proper foundation for your business, the proper accounting, the proper basically running the organization around your product. Products, you can come from a school and just build a product. That's fantastic. But if you have never run a business before, you will need a board. Like you will need all these other people that around you that have that kind of experience. And you need to be humble enough to accept that you do not know that. Either you get co-founders that have that experience, or you surround yourself with the people that actually do. And what ends up happening, especially with the second-time founders, is that they have seen all these screw-ups they did before, because some mistakes, you can easily change them. And some of them, you can't change them. Like, for example, if you get the wrong investors on board, you cannot really get rid of them. So, but because maybe you made them when you were in a desperate position, which is very common. But maybe next time, then like I have to vet my investors. Like those kind of experiences usually what helps with second time investors. But any founder that does not have that kind of experience running a business, it's always very important that they surround themselves with the people that have that experience with them. And when it comes to domain expertise, it does help when you come from like an organization and say like, okay, let's say like you are an engineer in the bank and say like, oh, I see like this is something we could do for our customers, but you push it through the hierarchy, but the bureaucracy like blocks you, for example. Mm-hmm. Maybe the board or a management team like sees things differently. That's possible. So going out to build that product yourself, it is, you already have like you're already a step ahead from like all the other fintech founders. But there is also a risk with that because you are basically coming with, let's say like, I know a problem that we are facing in our corporate entity, and I know what the solution could be. But maybe you should also like pay attention to listen to why the management does not want to implement that. So when you go out in the market, you need to always, you can be frustrated, like you can be right, that's okay. But pay attention to why no one is building that. So don't underestimate that. Maybe they have other insight or other information that you do not necessarily have. And when it comes to domain expertise, I also like people that have lived the problem. I see that especially in the diaspora, like also like in the West, founders that come to build the products for Africa, you always need to make sure that there is like at least someone in your team that has lived that problem. Because maybe you see it as a problem, but maybe the people you want to serve do not see it as a problem. Or like it's a minor inconvenience. Exactly. So it's not the kind of problem like they are going to be, or like your solution like to their problems, not something they are going to be talking at their dinner tables. Like having lived the problem, to me, is more powerful than having observed the problem from wherever you come from, whether from a corporate entity or from any other sources.
Don, I definitely agree with you, right? I think we need a lot more of that because there's another like one of the biggest investors in the world, Norrsken, I think.
Yeah.
He talked about this recently on a podcast where he said, it's people would always think that, let's say the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, like just were sleeping in their dorm and then they woke up and then they started coding Facebook and then they became close to $1 trillion company. But then he said that we've invested in a lot of companies. And one thing that we always see that the founders who end up succeeding are the founders who at least spent a lot of time thinking about the problem, even if they didn't build it. But even when they're young, like they were thinking some version of that problem.
Yeah.
So they've had, by the time they build that company, they've had, let's say 15, 20 years of just thinking about the problem, right? So by the time they build, it's actually going to be something that's going to be great. Because they're like, even when I was young, I was facing this problem or, my mom or somebody close to me. So by the time they end up building, there was, if you do a proper study, they've been thinking about it for a long time. And that helps a lot, right? Because the saying of fall in love with the problem, don't fall in love with your solution, right? Which is the problem is always right. And the problem with falling in love with the solution is that there could be 25,000 different ways of solving that problem.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't fall in love with, this is our way of solving it. It's like...
Exactly. And also like that also blocks you from listening to your users. So the people that are actually, you need that level of humility.
Yeah.
To really understand your users, listen to the users, and build the solution to the problem as they see it, and also like in a way that actually your solution helps them solve that.
Yeah. Well, what's your take on bootstrapping versus raising VC capital in Africa, particularly?
That's a tough one. But generally, if you can bootstrap, always do that. Because investors also love people that know how to bootstrap, basically. So going out to raise a capital sometimes is seen as an accomplishment, especially in our markets. But it's actually not necessarily a good thing, because it's a liability you are adding to your business. Like, you are bringing capital, yes, it can help you grow, but also it's a responsibility you have towards those investors. And those investors, actually, almost all of them, also have responsibility towards their LPs. So everyone like has like a different layer, like they have their bosses. So you are adding another layer of bosses, like you have to report to your investors, but also you still have to serve your customers, your users. So if you are bootstrapped, you are in a stronger position, like whenever you decided to raise capital. But again, having said that, it's not always easy to grow a product when you're bootstrapped, because maybe as a startup, you don't have like customers that are paying, that, that can help you like cover your costs. So you need maybe a degree of capital, a certain level of fundraising at some point. But I would pick anytime bootstrapped founders over the ones that are out there like spending most of their time just fundraising.
Yeah.
The customers, serving the customer is the most important thing a founder can do. Yeah. Not going to conferences, not going to chasing investors. Like, people will chase you when you have actually customers that love you. Like, investors will chase you. You will be the one saying like, oh, no, I don't want it. Then you can manage, you can afford to vet them. And make sure you have the right ones in your team. Sorry, on your cap table. Not just bringing your fresh capital, but also like bringing their networks, their expertise, like non-monetary value to your business.
Yeah.
So, and I just think like maybe bootstrapping should be seen more as a philosophy. Because even if you raise the capital, that doesn't mean you should be spending like crazy. It shouldn't be like black and white, like either you are bootstrapped or like you are fundraising, but more like having that mentality, like Jeff Bezos calls it, like it's always day one. Yeah. So always like be in a bootstrapped mode, even if you have capital. Yeah.
No, makes sense. And there's another element, which is not just the stress from investors when you take on external money, right? Doesn't matter where it came from. If it's VC, if it's even angel investment as well, to some degree, right? Does affect your business or your growth in one way or the other. And I think I like this notion of, somebody said, a very successful entrepreneur, he said that the problem with taking on external money versus taking on money shows itself when you're trying to solve a problem. So when you have a problem internally as a company and you don't have money, you basically look at the people in the room, your team, and then you say, how can these people solve this problem?
Yeah.
When you have money, you say, who should we pay?
Yeah, let's throw some money to it. Yeah.
And then it says that this is the problem with taking on external money, because you always want to pay to solve your problems.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't become innovative.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have money, you have to figure out a creative way that is very affordable or almost doesn't cost anything, because you don't have anything to spend on it to solve that problem. And that makes you, your product, and your whole team much more resourceful, much more innovative and creative.
Yeah.
When you have too much money in the bank, you start saying, okay, we need to hire a consultant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Come and do X study.
Yeah.
To come and speak to our customers. Me as a CEO, I don't have the time to speak to the customers. I'm busy doing other things, speaking at conferences. And this consultant is going to go and speak to these customers, right? Yeah. And give me the ideas of what we need to do.
Oh, that's.
What do you think about that?
You should, as a founder, try to avoid the consultants. Like in most cases, maybe they can come in for like legal stuff or like HR stuff, like the things that you don't necessarily have under control. But even when you do, try to be next to this consultant because you need to be able to do these things yourself moving forward. And back to this question also like of bootstrapped versus VC money. Look where we are in Africa. What is where are you going to IPO? So our exit options are very limited. So VCs also like they want to exit. That's their business model. They want to exit. They want to be able to return money to their LPs and also like get their own cut in the process, like their own carry. But we are in a market where it makes sense that you as a founder or as a business, you try to make a profit, so survive. Yeah, on margins, like I was saying earlier, like make your own money through by selling your products or service. So the more you raise, the more liability you're adding on your balance sheet. So as much as you can get the money from your customers, like the better position you are in, also like in the long term.
Yeah. You talked about something that I would love to get more thoughts on, which was, this notion of building SMEs and versus startups, right? And we all know the definition, which is, an SME is most likely a business that is being built. There's already a demand for it. You create a business to serve that demand, right? So the goal is not to grow super crazy. It's basically just to serve that market. And most of the time, a startup is trying to be a high growth company, right? Where you say we really want to grow as quickly as possible. And we believe that where we're going to win is going to be when, we scale. A lot of people are using this and we can make money. We can scale cheaply, let's say, right? And people can use it in various different countries without us having to have crazy operation costs in all those countries, right? And we can make money on those margins. In Africa, what should we be focusing on? What should entrepreneurs be thinking as the philosophy of building a company, right? Because we also have with these realities of most likely your uncle doesn't have a lot of money to give you to invest in that friends, family, and fools round. Like, oh yeah, my uncle, and they're gonna give me 50K, and then I have 250K, I can start a company. Most likely not gonna happen. So this philosophy of saying, but then I still want to change the world, versus making money from day one. Not saying we're going to offer it for free. When it becomes big and we see a retention, then we're going to start charging customers. Yeah. So we will only make money in 3 years. Yeah. Versus I'm building a product. I need a customer from day one that I ship that feature. Yeah. Right. Yeah. What's the I mean, again, there's no black and white, but what's a good approach to approaching business?
I do not have the perfect solution to that, but at least from what I've seen, of course, you can build a successful startup in Africa, but the chances of that happening are very, very minimal. So not everyone's going to become a full wave for Paystack. I'm sure they had their own share of challenges, but I do not think that we should be chasing like every founder, every startup to become a unicorn. we have already problems, like real challenges on this continent that are actually also like a good opportunities, like founders. And in the spirit of doing things that don't scale, especially at the beginning, it's okay to start as an SME. You can start as an SME, of course, like add an element of tech, and tech should come in in the first place as an efficient and as a way to add efficiency to your SME. I do not like to use these terms, but for the sake of context, we let's use them. So add tech to be efficient, but also as a possibility to scale. But that mindset, like coming from university and say, like, I'm going to build the next filter wave, that is very unlikely to happen. But if you come from university and say, like, I'm going to build a business, like there is this challenge that I'm seeing, I'm going to build a business to solve this challenge, and I'm going to make money in the process. So if business exists to make money, yeah. So it's not about like I'm going to solve this problem for 100,000 people. No, I want to make money while solving this problem. Then tech comes in for efficiency and for scalability. But that the more we have the mentality of an SME, less of than a typical startup, the better.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think we somehow forgot the notion or the definition of a business, right? And then we started finding these fancy words to call these ventures. Yeah. Oh, it's a high growth venture, or it's a startup, or it's an SME, it's a tech enabled, whatever. I'm like, at the end of the day, you know, all these companies, the most valuable companies in the world, the Apples, they did not start saying, we're going to revolutionize with, you know, we got to build this amazing app or software to do X, Y, Z. They're literally making a physical computer and selling it, getting paid for it, and making sure that their costs are very low to make it versus the cost they sell it for.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
The formula is very simple. There's no this and this and this. No. And then we will only raise money because a client has signed a document saying they're ordering 25,000 computers, but we don't have the money to produce them.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we need to raise money from an investor to come and produce those computers, because we have a client there. And
then the investor also look at your contract as a way of like minimizing their own risks.
Here's the money.
It's simple. Actually, it is that simple. And what I fear sometimes that we make things like too complicated and make it like a fancy, like, you know, like in conferences, like, you know, like to make ourselves feel good. But indeed, we forget those first principles of what it means to build a business. It's just like you're creating value to someone willing to pay for that. And selling whatever product or service like higher than it costs you to produce. Like, then the rest, how you do it, like whether you import, you manufacture in China, you manufacture locally, or you use an app, or you use whatever medium you use, that is up to you.
Yeah.
The customer, most customers do not care. Like, they don't care. Like, what they want, does this thing solve my problem?
Yeah.
Is it if it solves it in a way that it saves my money, or makes me money, or saves me time? 90% they will say, I mean,
yeah. What are the companies that you're seeing adopting the right mentality and philosophy of building or solving problems on the continent these days? But what are the companies you're looking at and you're like, okay, these are interesting?
I would not go through names, but I think it's a reality that's becoming obvious to a lot of founders. There was a pre-COVID, then early COVID days when the money was cheap. A lot of people were just building, chasing the next evaluation. But the money is becoming more expensive, especially in Africa, where we don't have control of our currencies and all the other challenges that even the West is facing, or geopolitical challenges. So there are also like questions out there among the LPs community, like, is actually VC industry sustainable in Africa? Does it work for Africa? Because like we copied the VC the way it works in US, the way it works in the developed markets, and try to apply it to Africa. So there are question marks all around the place, like from founders and also from the VC industry itself. So I think more and more we are going to see more founders, like more startups, like also like adopting this mentality of SME and seeing tech as an enabler, not as an industry itself. I think that's also healthy for our markets because more young people can create startups. Well, what do we? SME/startups, and there is a higher probability of creating more jobs in the process rather than having like a very highly valued startup that maybe employs like half of their staff are even outside of the continent, yet it is serving the continent, or like hires people from all over the world to come and work on these problems here in Africa, where we have young people that are still employed. So I think it is happening. It is happening. It's a shift in the mentality that we need to build things that work for Africa rather than copying models that we assume because they worked somewhere in the West that they should automatically work for us as well.
What are you building right now?
Well, it's same as what we did with Norrsken. So basically trying to scale that model. And my belief is still the same that there's still a lot of opportunities out there that could be useful for young people, especially here in Africa. But there is a mismatch. There's no product market fit or service market fit.
Yeah.
So now what I'm working on mostly is to build the hubs in and outside of Africa. So, like right now that I'm here in Rwanda, I'm working with the secondary cities in Rwanda to help them build their own mini Norrskens, like their own innovation ecosystems. But I'm also supporting some other African cities to build their own innovation ecosystems. And besides that, I'm also working with the diaspora because, again, I've seen for the last 3-4 months that I've been fully based in Europe, I'm realizing that there is a lot of initiatives that are targeting the African continent, but most Africans that are there are not aware of them. So I'm trying to build a community and a network of people that are working or building solutions for the African continent to come together and get to know each other and maybe start like building collaborations and complementing each other rather than like working in silos. Because particularly for the African community in Europe, almost everyone is trying to do something like one way or another for Africa, either for their own home, family, like starting a farm, like buying a little house, like in their building a little house in their village, or some like have like even bigger initiative, like building a school, like building startups. But it's happening a lot in silos. So trying to build that community where people can share ideas and the resources and build on each other's ambitions and passions.
Yeah.
So in and outside of Africa.
Are you building this under one like big company, or are we gonna see like a launch?
No, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. So now the phase that I'm in is basically in Africa, like do this as a consultancy, like helping cities have their own ecosystem. So not me like coming and say like, oh, I'm going to build something of my own in your city, but really empowering cities to do to have their like that local ownership. But maybe soon you will see something being launched but we're not there at that stage yet.
Yeah.
So it's still like the product markets analysis phase.
That's his face. That's a very good one.
But also, as maybe you notice on social media, I'm quite active.
Yep.
That's also like a part of me, like trying to understand like what works, because it's always easy to sit back and assume that the marketing is this, instead of like actually communicating and collecting feedback as you go. Then maybe that helps you build something that actually is needed. Achieving the simplicity you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. So there might be a young aspiring entrepreneur or an entrepreneur who's early in their journey right now. First of all, the question is entrepreneurship for everyone?
Of course not. But the entrepreneurial mindset, that should be for everyone, at least. Even if you are not an entrepreneur, so you're not building a business, but that mindset, even if you are within an organization, is quite powerful to have.
Yeah. And as a young entrepreneur, what are some of the things that when you're building your company are the things you should be prioritizing your time on, and things that should be considered as distractions?
Prioritize your customer. So the people that will take their wallet out of their pockets and they give you a portion of their hard-earned money, those people deserve the most of your attention. Anything else you get involved in should be designed to help you as entrepreneur X to get more money out of that customer. Like when I say that, it sounds wrong, but basically it serve better that customer so that maybe the customer can pay you more. But distractions like ranging from conferences, from back-to-back trainings, from basically anything that takes you away from the customer, be mindful of why you are doing that. And that is not just for entrepreneurs, but also everyone who is supposedly out there trying to help entrepreneurs. This is also a message for them. Do not waste entrepreneurs' time. They do not have the time to go through your bullshit, like whatever you think that you are the expert. They do not have time. They do not have that luxury. Actually, it's not just the part of time, like they do not have the luxury. And every time they come to your service, even if it is free, you can say like, oh, we do this for free, we don't charge. But it's still costing the entrepreneur their time that they should be spending with their customer or trying to build solution for the customer. So I think that is like a mentality we need to have. I see it a lot, especially like in the ecosystem building, where we always, like when I was with Norrsken, like it was so easy like for people to come to me like, oh, we wanted to invite your entrepreneurs to come to our event. Like, why should they do that? Why should they do that? Like that's very big question that everybody should be asking themselves that. And the people that choose to become entrepreneurs, they are choosing a hard life. Let me put it that way. So they are choosing a hard life. So if you're a young person out there and deciding to become an entrepreneur, you need to know like this is not a joke. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot of challenges along the way. Of course, if you succeed, the rewards can be massive, but it's not going to be easy. So it also means that if we are out there trying to help entrepreneurs, we should understand that they are taking a massive risk. Like I told you when I was when I started my career, like working with farmers, like I always told them, like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. We make your life easier. But not until I became an entrepreneur myself that I realized that actually it's not always that easy. All the things you read out there, the success stories, like it's not that easy. And we needed to help entrepreneurs and encourage entrepreneurs to spend as much time as possible with their people they're trying to serve, so their customers and the ones that pay, actually, as you mentioned. So entrepreneur there, spend time with your customers. The rest, try to limit it as much as you can.
Pascal, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yusuf. This was fun.
Coming on the podcast, but also for the work you've done in the ecosystem, really bringing, especially in the ecosystem building space, bringing something amazing that is change lives, and it keeps on changing lives of entrepreneurs on the continent, but also the work you've done being an entrepreneur yourself and the work you're now doing to bring these ideas and these initiatives into other parts of the continent, and the amazing advice for entrepreneurs.
It has been fun. Sometimes challenging journey, but it was mostly fun. But what really I'm interested in is to change the mentalities, because entrepreneurship is hard, and we need entrepreneurs as a continent. But we need it. We cannot help entrepreneurs if we don't put ourselves in their feet. So that shift in mentality needs to happen. And I hope through these hubs, through these initiatives, we can accomplish something that's transformation. The how, that's always subject to interpretation, but the why we do this should be clear to everyone. It's about entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurship is about providing a service to customers. And if there's no one paying for your service, you're in the wrong business.
Wow. Thank you, man. And thank you for making it, man. Looking forward to the new product.
Yeah. Soon enough.
Cheers, man.
Yeah. Cheers.